on store layout and design. Whether you're opening a new store or renovating an existing store, how you design your store will determine your store image. Today, more than ever, the independent really must market to a specific customer. We can't be all things to all people. You have to market to either a lifestyle, an income. It has to be clear. Your customer has to understand exactly what it is you're trying to convey across them in your merchandising mix. So we're going to start with the floor plan, which is really it can be as advanced or complicated as this one, which happens to be a 32,000 square foot store, or as simple and as basic as the average store in the United States, which is about 1,800 square feet. I usually recommend on a floor plan that the customer work with a 1/4-inch graph paper. And this can be picked up at any office supply store. It allows you very easily to see to scale what your fixturing and what your checkouts and where your areas that you'll define on this will be and how they'll look. So we start off usually by putting in the outside or overall dimensions. Once you have that done, once you have your outside and overall dimensions on your plan, you then would mark off your windows and you would mark off your doors. Once this is done, you then go in and then you can mark off your stock area and your office area. So right away we see the store is starting to shrink, and this is very typical. People are always surprised at how small a store starts to become once you start marking off these areas, especially the stock area. I always recommend a smaller stock area if you can. It forces you to just buy better. Next step is the checkout. Personally, myself, I prefer checkouts if they can be in the center. This allows for a lot easier customer service and makes the store a little bit more secure as far as watching the corners and areas. It's more of a security issue, but I personally like checkouts in the center. If the store is long and narrow, usually the checkout will end up being on either the left or the right side of the store. Once this is done, the next step is to, although you haven't picked your fixturing, and we'll talk about fixturing in another segment, you want to lay out where your fixturing, where you would like your fixturing to be. And the important thing here is to keep the front of the store open and spacious. This is very important. You want the store to be inviting to the customer. And you don't want to line up your fixturing like a drugstore. You want to have your fixturing somewhat in an organized, random way so that it creates a curiosity to your customers. So when they're in looking at one display, they're enticed to make the next step and go to the next display. We'll talk about lighting in another segment, but also lighting will follow this your fixturing. The lighting will follow this, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Now, the floor plan should be somewhat roughed out so that you have something that will appear like this. So basically, you're going to have your overall dimensions on the outside. You're going to have your checkout where you, in the center in this particular case, and you're going to have an overview of where you're fixturing. Although we haven't picked the fixturing, we know that where we want it to be. Once this is all done, you now are ready to merchandise the store. More than likely, you've hopefully picked out the type of store that you are going to have, so you have a pretty good idea of the types of merchandise you're going to carry. And the great thing about having a floor plan is that once you start labeling in the merchandise and where it's going to go, you will buy in a much better and balanced way, because you'll only be buying to fill the store. There may be a little bit extra that ends up in the stockroom, but once an area has been marked off, obviously you don't have to buy for that area. At this point, I would say you have a good working plan. This plan could be taken to the gift shows or to the Trade Mart or anywhere you're going to work in merchandising your store. And once it's finished, you can just make copies of it, and you can change it from season to season. So as you're going into the Christmas season, we can take those areas and just do your Christmas displays, and you can change it basically even from season to season on a continuing basis just by making extra copies of the original floor plan. So I hope I've given you some basic information that will be helpful, and I want to thank you and look forward to the next segment.